Hello, hello. How are we all doing? So I will just give you a brief overview of what we're trying to cover. So basically, we're going to do a little bit on the philosophy that we have of the Chicago Red Stars in possession, some principles, some action from games, some philosophy work that we've been working on since last year pre-season when when we joined the team. Craig Harrington and I joined the team. So Craig's helped me put a lot of this together. And we were obviously trying to change the style of play and try to move it into a more possession-based system. So kind of the journey about that there, and then some factors to consider. What this isn't is there's a certain answer, a certain system that's going to be the answer to everything. And I think in football today, the flexibility is such a big thing that there's so many different factors to consider based on the context of your players, the ability level, the culture of the club, the culture of the area, opposition, and all those things. So we're going to cover some of those things today. I'm going to then look at a training session. Craig's going to talk us through, and then we've got a guest session from Carmelina Moscato, who's based in the Canadian FA. She also done her UEFA A license very recently. So Carm's unbelievable. Done a webinar with her last week, and she's done a little training session for everyone. So really excited to put it together. Please let me know your thoughts. Anything you'd like a bit more of for webinar 2, and we can balance it a bit, and I'll do a little bit of Q&A at the end if you have any questions at all, and we'll go from there. So we'll start it off with the philosophy. Like I said, when we joined the Red Stars last summer, it was a little, or last January, it was a little bit of a new beginning in terms of the state of play. So I'm going to show you now a bit of background behind that there and what we were trying to do and what was the starting point. And
So I think when coaching in possession, you have to establish your starting spot. For us, very much the group of players that we were working with, the culture within the club, and then the philosophy of the coaching staff, which we were all aligned in the way we wanted to play and the idea of the game that we wanted to bring out of the players and with the players over the season. The starting point from a training point of view, which at our level was very much about angles and positioning and distances. And this was an example, probably the only unopposed work we did in the pre-season was, looking at these principles of how to attract pressure, being compact out of possession, being expansive in possession. And you can see here, this would just be done after practice, an unopposed exercise just as part of the cool down. 3 midfielders, back 4 in yellow, back 4 in pink. One back 4 moves the ball in possession with the midfielders, expansive. The other back 4 in pink shadows and uses their defensive shape. So the 2 back 4s work. One works in possession, one works out of possession. And just knowing the differences in the shape and in those 2 moments of the game. Then the transition, you can see the yellow team transitioning, changing their shape from expansive to compact. A lot of this work, a lot of different variations of it, and again, a lot of distances, a lot of angles, and then establishing the positions and the shape that we wanted in possession. So a lot of that was our starting point. Speed of the ball, the technical quality, the angles, the support. Then we moved to looking at what that would look at against opposition, obviously, with one forward, what we were looking to create the diamond, and to get past that initial defensive line, and then what would that trigger? A set of movements of wide players on different lines, and then trying to get more players higher up in possession. If the opposition played 2 forwards, how would we look to break? Number of variations. The most simple one was the holder splitting them, and then again, once that initial first line of pressure was broken, what would that trigger higher up the pitch? We really wanted to emphasise solving problems in possession, so in order to do that, back to the positioning. Once we established positions, it was about not panicking, playing under pressure, inviting pressure rather than panicking when pressure arrived. And then these principles were had to be aligned in every training session. They had to be constant, and then simple principles, overload to underload, and then creating positional numerical supremacy higher up the field. Training sessions, making sure a set of training sessions align, transitions, compact spaces, being able to move the ball and move opposition lines, and then being able to take advantage of spaces when we had overloads. So these were the type of exercises that we used on a daily basis, both for the warm-up and for the main session. Before we went into the tactical work, always make sure that the session or the exercise included all the principles that we had established with the staff and then shared with the players. Of course, 4v4 plus 3, getting the players aware of what we were trying to do with the exercise, not only in possession but out of possession in the transition moments. Constantly work on this. Is a very much a daily basis. Wasn't one exercise that we used every day. It was a variation of exercises, and then there was also a progression of exercises.
So, like I said, those issues or those challenges that everyone faces in pre-season, basically the starting point is, I think we look a lot at what the players can do, but for us it was very, very important of what the players wanted to do and getting them excited about a style of play that was going to be and define the Red Stars moving forward was what we were trying to do. Now, when you get into the debates of opposed, unopposed, structured and rondos and all those interesting conversations that usually take place on online forums today, I think you need a little bit of everything, and especially in a full-time environment that we're fortunate to have, too much of anything can become a little bit stale, and it's always getting the players thinking. So at our level, the players do enjoy the passing patterns, they do enjoy the unopposed work, because if you look at it from their perspective, they're all technically at a very, very high level, but they enjoy honing that craft every single day. They enjoy working at that there. And when you're, sharpening that there, and when you're just starting a training session and getting the touches going, it's usually whenever they're at their, they're really intense with that there. Whereas sometimes you do it with a younger age group, they disengage a little bit quicker. So what I wanted to then show was that was our starting point, for us to kind of use those small-sided rondos. They first became almost a foundation of what we wanted to do because they had the idea of the game. So certain rondos was attracting pressure, breaking pressure. Certain rondos was the quicken the speed of play, was to go slow, and then quick, boom, boom, boom. Certain rondos were to work it into one area and work it out of the other. But once those then became a style of play, then it had to progress to 11v11. It had to progress to more specifics, more details, because the idea of the team is not just based on the idea of the coach. Everyone has a micro responsibility with their position, and ultimately at the level that we're working at, the players really want to know the clarity and what their roles and responsibilities are, both in and out of possession. So what I wanted to kind of progress it to for you as a coach watching it is to see where that progression takes place. Now, as I roll this next video, we still use the passing patterns, we still use the rondos, but whereas they were a real foundation, they were a massive piece of the pre-season period, they then took a little bit more of a back seat. They were their time almost diminished from a 20 minutes into a training session, from a 5 minutes into a training session, and instead then we look to spark the decision-making process of each individual within the team construct, and this is how we did that there.
This was month 2 of the season. You can see it's the build with a compressed defensive block, 3 lines of pressure, and trying to play out of it. And you can see in this example that we almost struggle with it. We play into the block and turn the ball over. We didn't move the block. This was 2 months later. You can see here that the dimensions of the field are different. We're using vertical corridors, and this helped establish what the idea was. You can see we moved the block on that occasion, and constant work on what we were trying to do, areas we were trying to create, situations, players we were trying to get in certain positions. Factors to consider would be the margins of success. And again, I go back to that, the daily basis. This was early on in pre-season last year for us. And this is just 8 ways the possession nearly works. Player picks the ball up. If she splits and opens up with the pass, she takes out 7 players. But it's an extra pass backwards. And although we keep possession, we don't take advantage of the space we opened it up initially. And then it's closed down. Next example, ball goes back to the goalkeeper again. We love the bravery and the decision to build, and we work the ball out really well to the fullback. But it's just, again, those details, relationship between the fullback and the wide forward just weren't in sync, and the ball turns over. This one here, again, we're patient, we start the build, and we go over the line of pressure, and then if the outside back's touch goes forward, she gets access to the back 4 right away, but her touch goes backwards, we turn the ball over, and now it favours the opposition in the transition. Another way that the details plays a role is in the build. They back off a little, and then speed of play doesn't move the block, and then the block gets the pressure, and then the ball gets stuck, and we end up turning the ball over. This is the details again. It's a great turn from Dani Colaprico, and there's a space just to open, and there's the attacking midfielder high that would again break 6 or 7 players out of the game. We go backwards, we keep possession, but as we go backwards, it allows the opponents to pressure a little bit more aggressively, and they win the ball higher up the field. Same game, we look to build, we work the ball out really, really well here. So this is a great bit of play. We don't panic, we open the ball up, and then just when it's time to play into the forwards, the quality of the entry pass matters as well, and it's got to be zipped in, but it's just lofted in, allows the centre back to be overly aggressive, and it creates a 1v2 situation, and we are almost back to where we started. This example, we build the ball and break 2 lines of pressure, and now you can see the attacking midfielder picks up the ball, but the outside back is a little bit slow in joining in and just misses it by a yard. So the margins are very, very small when you're playing and building out from the back between success and failure. And this was just an example in this game. The second half, the opponents dropped off, played more of a block, and we played the same way as we did from the press to the block. And you can see here, turn the ball over. So there's so many decisions, so many variables. And I thought that was a good idea of how difficult and complex it is. Opponent tendencies are very, very important as well. So whenever you play against a 4-2-3-1, not all 4-2-3-1s are the exact same. So in this one here, there's 2 ways that we created space for our attacking midfielder by moving one of their number 6s. You can see we're patient in the build-up. Julie Ertz drops low. This number 6 drops low with her, takes her out of the space, and then Julie pops into the space that she just vacated, and all of a sudden receives the ball in that area and has access to their back 4, plays a great through ball. In this occasion, you can see what happens against a different opposition. You can see the 2 6s deep, and one of our players drops in. But instead of pushing up with her, she just passes her on to her teammate. So now the 2 6s stay, but we invert one of our fullbacks to get in that space, and now she draws her out because she's in possession of the ball, and then one of the players drops off from the attacking line, and all of a sudden we're in front of their back 4. So 2 different ways to doing it based off 2 different defensive styles.
Hopefully you start to see a little bit of a roadmap of what kind of process we were going on. The first one was getting ourselves comfortable into an idea of the game. And then as that progressed, that then progressed into specific roles and responsibilities and more 11v11. So sometimes I think that when we talk about possession systems, our starting point is the formation. When I think the starting point should most times be the idea of the way the game is going to be played, because you got to generate a little bit of excitement around your players. And then with that then comes, you're usually at the stage where a competition is going to enter. So that's pre-season at club, high school, college, club, professional level. It all follows the same format where you have the idea and then you almost get it going from there under building the plane as the plane's taken off, as we refer to it. So the next stage for us is that of those individual roles, because they become more and more clear, because the margins, like I said on that clip, the margins are very, very, very small whenever you're up against very, very good players. So a mistake here or there can prove vital, or a little bit of magic here or there can win you the game. So the professional player normally wants that clarity and that role and responsibility. And then what you want from that player, I think going into the details for what you want from formation then has to take a little bit more of a positional stage. So what I wanted to share was what we wanted from in the centre back position, especially because that's almost the quarterback of your possession system. It was for us, because if we were going to build through the centre backs, then the centre backs were going to spend a lot of time in possession. So what did we want from those centre backs? It's understanding what passes value more than others, and then where you want that player, what spaces you want those players to occupy, or what spaces you want those players to create. So for a centre back, I think that the tricky part of being a centre back today is those demands in possession are getting greater and greater, and centre backs today are getting better and better in possession. So this was an area that we wanted to look at and try to expose or exploit. Now, I want to show you a little bit of a video from one of our centre backs, Katie Naughton, who went to Australia in the off season, and the defensive systems were a little bit different. So to try and grow with her game, and try to get her a little bit more aggressive in possession of the ball. And we talk about aggression for defenders, and we usually refer to that as winning headers, winning tackles. But I think so much of it refers to in the game, refers to aggression, is the ability and the confidence to go forward in possession of the ball. So this is a little video of how we did that, and what areas that we challenged our defenders to do as well.
Another factor to consider is the centre backs in possession. I think this is a common challenge, is centre backs reading the defensive line on the opposition. So you can see here that yes, they keep possession, but do they move the red team? That one centre forward turns to two centre forwards, but they're playing a little bit too deep, and when the ball's played forward, there's more red shirts than there are white shirts. The space isn't compressed and reds end up winning the ball. So trying to get those defenders to step and engage and take that space and be aggressive in possession of the ball can be a challenge, and something that we wanted to encourage our defenders to do this year. So this was one of our defenders in the Australian League, Katie Naughton. You can see here when she plays the ball a little bit higher, it's broken up and there's more red shirts than there are white shirts to counter press and win the ball. Again, you can see the starting spot of the red centre forwards, who give the defender the space. So we want that starting spot to be a little bit higher. And if that starting spot is a little bit higher, it engages pressure, it attracts pressure. So these are things that sometimes rondo activities don't give you, because you establish the starting spot for your players, but it is a factor in whether you can move opposition lines and manipulate opposition lines. This is out of possession, where she steps forward and wins, and you can see the different mindset now. It's much more aggressive. That's a great ball to the centre forward. And then this one here, again, out of possession, steps forward, wins it, compresses the area, counter press, they win the ball, white team win the ball, they've got numbers forward, and they score from the cross. So encouraging centre backs to take space in and out of possession. So sometimes an overlooked area of possession teams are long passes. Whenever you build against a team who doesn't press, they'll usually sit in a block or a trap and look to compress space. So having players who have the ability to go over that block and then having players who can play underneath it is also a skill set that can be utilised by possession teams. So these are a couple of examples of us doing it. Here's a long ball from the fullback, but you can see the behaviours of the two central midfielders underneath it and creating a shot on goal. The role of the 9 changes because they become the provider, and then the movement off them is usually by the attacking midfielders. Again, this is just playing off the centre forward and a shot on goal. So this is us in black, and you can see the white team pretty compressed, sitting off a little bit, and it's about looking to pick up key spaces that aren't necessarily in front of you. And then this last one is more of a cross, but again the behaviours are consistent with once the diagonal ball is played, the movement from the players underneath the centre forward create the chance on goal.
I think there's a couple of things there that I wanted to follow up on, and the first is just again getting the detail and the consistency and the clarity right in every position. I think is a starting point of what you want in possession from that player. The second thing then is to challenge that player, and I think you can challenge every player today within their positions. And sometimes centre back, it's not a very exciting job stopping opposition forwards or stopping opposition attackers, but I think you can challenge more in possession. You can challenge them more to get into the opposition half. But in terms of then how you bring that back to the training field, I think it's very, very important. And especially for me, when you look at rondo exercises, that I'm a massive, I put a questionnaire up there. I'm a massive fan of different variations of rondo exercises. But what I don't like about rondo exercises specifically is that it puts the players in the position to start with. So they get to engage the line of pressure already because it's built in, when in reality, one of the hardest things in soccer is not actually breaking and beating the pressure. It's enticing it and getting it to come to you. So sometimes players and teams break pressure easier than they break blocks. And it's because it's more instinctual. You can play and you can see things a little bit quicker. So having session design that you can entice that defender without starting her in a position, and that can be done by different zone games and different progressions from that there. But it's something that we want our centre backs, because the more aggressive they are out of possession, the more aggressive they will be in possession, and those things I think are finely tuned. When you're looking at playing models and you're looking at tactical systems, usually the characteristics of a team out of possession are pretty similar to what those characteristics are in possession. And if you look at Liverpool and you look at Tottenham at the Champions League at the weekend, they're two really, really aggressive teams, both in and out of possession. So that's where what we wanted to do basically with individuals. Now, as we take that back to our last little video, it's about the last goal of the coaching staff, and Rory in particular wanted tactical flexibility in the teams. So he didn't want us to go out every day or every game and play the exact same way. And it's probably why this webinar is more as things that you should be considering presented that way, rather than this is what we do, than maybe Barcelona or Man City would do. One of our philosophies as a staff then was that flexibility, and that flexibility was going to be basically against the scouting is higher at the professional level, and if you have success playing one way 1 week, another team's got 6 days to prepare for that there. So flexibility is a massive thing. So I want to show you now just different ways that we use flexibility throughout the season, and different ways, sometimes inverting the fullbacks, bringing the wide forward out, sometimes dropping the centre midfielder, the holding midfielder in between the centre backs to become a back three, sometimes the wing back or the wide forward and the outside back switching positions, and just constantly, and Rory's philosophy in that there is to give the players a little bit more ownership for that there. So a lot of this here, what I'm going to show you, is not coach-led in terms of it's done at the stadium. There's a coach shout and players to move and rotate. A lot of it is the players sensing the time and the opportunity to do it and the confidence to do it. But then a lot of that there goes back to the training where you have to work at it. And a lot of it, like I said, that clip that I showed of the game falling apart sometimes, you have to go through a lot of that there if you want your players to be confident enough to go into a match and make those decisions by themselves. And that's something that Rory is very, very big on.
Tactical flexibility, this just from last season. What's the difference between possession with a purpose and without a purpose? It's not just about creating a chance or a shot on goal within 2 or 3 passes. In this one here, we're playing against a very disciplined, a very compact midfield. So what we want to do is attract the pressure, and you can see how expansive our back four is there. And we want to be patient in possession and try and attract the defending team to press from the front and keep switching the ball and keep changing the starting spot. So it does look slow, it does look boring, it does look as if we're out of ideas. But you can see here that as soon as the press is triggered and as soon as one of the forwards go, this is the opportunity that we look for. Now, the opposition now have to shift and one of their holding midfielders moves out of position. And now all of a sudden it goes from a back 6 to a back 5 and we have 4 players ahead of it. Little combination play, and now we're attacking the back 4, which is where we want the ball and where we believe we are at our most dangerous. Create a good chance from it. This is another example of different flexibility in terms of movement from outside backs, wide forwards, and then not only being patient in possession, but not panicking whenever we're pressured. So you can see here, the purple team apply pressure, compress the space, but instead of panicking, we stick to our principles. We work the ball out of the space, see if there's any opportunities to go forward. There wasn't. We keep moving the ball, change the starting spot, and then all of a sudden the purple team get compact, the full backs are high. Great ball from Julie. And again, the purple team recover. We try to get down that side. Full backs high on the other side. And the back line is pushed up slightly. So we've got space now. Can we get in front of that back 4? And it's a great pass, and then we don't panic in pressure. As soon as one of the wide midfielders receives the ball facing the back line, our centre forward Sam Kerr is away and creates a great chance. And then this is another central block, but another way of playing against it. This is our 2 centre mids in red. That's the central block of the opposition in white. And you can see here that our 2 central midfielders just take up wide positions outside the block. And once one of them gets some space, Dani Colaprico here gets some space, she drives forward in possession. And then we can work the ball into a higher line. One of our fullbacks, Aaron Gellerland, attacks, and then Motts heads in towards goal. So that was a great goal for us.
Those are the different types of, when you're playing against different forms of opposition, in terms of, are they sitting deep, are they pressing, are they playing 1 up top, 2 up top, 3 up top? I think that as the level increases, the ability that decision making increases with it. And for me, sometimes we oversell possession as this technical system where you have to be able to pass the ball back and forth or you have to be so technically efficient. But in reality, it becomes a game of decision making, and then it becomes a game of how confident and brave the players are in those decisions. Because I'm a believer personally that a coach can really impact a game at the time defensively, but a coach can't really do a lot on real time in possession of the game, because the players can't process information from the coach and then see information while in the ball. It's just very, very difficult to do. So having players that are brave enough, having players who trust one another to move into space, move out of space, having players who can play the game and read the game and then execute, it's very, very difficult. One of the things that it's easy, I think, to say that it's the great players can do it, but I think for us it was very much a process. You can see how fluid that was towards the end of those tactical flexibility clips, and then the complexities at the start where it fell apart. It was just 1%, 2% short of it in that pre-season period, and if you ask me what the key of it was, I would say personally that it was the exposure to those decisions every single day. And that's something that when you go to session design, now obviously and we're fortunate to have some phenomenal footballers, but when you're looking at challenging the players, giving them their roles and responsibilities in possession, I think you also then have to make sure that in those Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can expose them to situations that are going to occur in the game, and where they can feel and process and review it and get feedback and get better. And maybe you see things that you were not aware of before that can make you think about the tactical plan of the game as well. So for us, a big part of our environment in Chicago is the training process and how it's planned. And we're definitely not a staff who have 40 training plans all done out from the day one through the end of the season. It's a weekly process based on who we're playing against, based on where the team are at, and based on what areas specifically that we want to get after the opposition. So those probably are about 30-minute conversations that probably continue for another 6 hours on email chains about situations that we're looking to recreate the next day, and using a lot of video to try and get the players before training. But moving on now to Craig Harrington's video and his piece on session design, it's very, very much a process of where everyone brings a couple of ideas to the table, and then we discuss which ones are best that day. But it can be a very, very creative way of looking at training, because some, as a staff, all view the game a different way as well. So I'll show you that and just the process that we go through for a typical training session. Craig's going to look at the attacking side of the game here in possession, not based on build up, trying to hit every angle, because we've only basically got one big training session a week where we can hammer this through. So if we were to do one build up session, would you be then taken away from the final third? Can you build a training session that can include as many factors as you can for the game coming up?
Hey, my name's Craig Harrington. I'm going to walk you through what a typical attacking session might look like from us at the Red Stars. We try and work on how we're going to exploit the opposition. This session here I'm going to talk you through is about just us focusing on breaking lines and playing through the team in the third. So we start with a warm-up here, a passing exercise. You have 2 target players in the middle of 2 mannequins, and then there is players at either end of the grid. These 2 players here start with a ball. They find the closest target player with a pass, and then they start to emerge onto the field. As that ball's played into the target player, it lays off to this player, who then finds the highest player through this line of the mannequins in there. They both move on again. The ball is played out this way. They then come in, they play out, and then they get out. And then the exercise goes the opposite way, playing the first ball into our highest player. We then progress the exercise going forward, where we then start to bring in a bit of a combination play. So now the first pass will find the highest player, That breaks that first line of our mannequins. It then plays and bounces back in. So this could be the center forward. This could be your number 10, your attacking midfielder. And then that player will then find a ball into this gap or back this way for the runners coming past that line to break in. Third man runs, again, same thing. They play out, they get out. After we've done those two first sections, we then take the group, we move over to an area over here, and in 7x7 grids, 8x8s, we'll play 3v1, 3v2s for 90 seconds. In the 3v2s, we'll be looking for run-throughs. So if we've got our 3 attacking players and 2 defenders, we'll be looking for splits, we'll be looking for players to run through, movement off that ball, and then the 3v1, we're just looking for players being active and sharp movements throughout that. Once we've gone through our 3v1s and 3v2s, we come back to this grid and we progress again. This time we've added 2 more target players in there to create havoc, a bit more chaos, a bit more decision making from players. So this time, same idea, players are going to play in to their target players. They can combine in, runners go. This time though, if they aren't ready, these players will dribble and try and break lines differently. So they might play into this player, they can play for the overlap, and they go on. So now we start to create a bit more chaos inside here, but we still want the theme to be breaking lines and the ball transferring from one end to the other. Once they do that, they play out, they get out. Once we've kind of set the ideas and themes in players' heads about the breaking lines, about playing forward, thinking penetration, running forward, we then move into the bigger picture because the players are at a level where we can then start to paint these ideas. So the blue team's the attacking team. We set them up in our formation, our shape. So right here I've got our right back, 2 centre backs, left back. Here's our left forward, centre forward, the attacking midfielder, 2 holding midfield players, and then the right forward. We've set them up against a back 4 that the opposition had. Then they had 3 in midfield and 2 wide forwards, and we take away the attacking player. We have 2 target players here in yellow on the outsides that can move anywhere along this red line. The blue team will have 10 soccer balls. They have 10 attempts to try and work the ball with an offside line in place. We'll have a linesman, someone that works that line to keep them honest. They have 10 balls to try and score as many goals as they can. If they score a goal, they get 3 points. If they get a shot on target, they get 1 point. The red team is trying to work and maintain this line. They'll let the first ball go into a player, and we start it randomly. It could be into a centre back, could be out to the left back, could be into a higher player. As soon as the red team win the ball, they are automatically just trying to play into a target player or work the ball across that red line or being in possession of the ball. If the red team do that, they get 3 points straight away. So that keeps the score on, keeps it competitive. We use the 10 balls to try and keep the team with a bit of purpose, bit of energy, and understanding that they've only got those 10 balls to execute what we want to do. So once we've gone through how we're going to attack and break down the opposition and get into the final third and create havoc, we then take it back and start from our goalkeeper and want to talk and show the team how we want to progress the ball up the field and start that and break the lines and get over the halfway line. We add an opposition goal at the far end just because it's more fun for the attackers to go to goal. So the ball will start with the red centre forward attacker. They will have a shot, and as soon as that shot happens, if it goes in, not, another ball's played into our goalkeeper, and our goalkeeper will then play out into a blue player, and then we look at the movements and ideas that we want to do to progress the ball into the opposition's half. And this may be 2 systematic splitting. Some days it may be even that you want to get the whole team up, and then we'll look at zones and areas that we want to just kick the ball into. So depending what your needs and ideas are and your themes and style of play, this can be worked in to suit you. Again, we'll give the blue team 10 balls to do this so that they're focused, the details matter, they're in tune to it. They also know that, hey, 10 balls, we're done with this. So again, if they get it over here and they end up with a shot on goal, we give them 3 points. If they score, they get 5. The red team, if they can win the ball, they're going straight to the big goal. They get 5 points for a goal. And again, that allows us to work on different ideas of that quick transition moments. We lose the ball, how we converge, how do we move, and then expanding to the bigger shape because we play continuously as and when the blue team win the ball. The next phase from this, we would literally just push this goal back, and we would go 11v11, and we would play either 2 segments of 10 minutes, or we may just play one 12-minute section. And then once we've done that, individuals may break off into what they need and needs for the day.
So that was an example of what we would do. Again, that session would change every single week based on the tendencies of the opposition and based on where we felt that we needed to improve as a team. So still leaving a lot of space for final third play, the midfield play, the build-up, trying to hit as many things as possible. It may seem that we have professional level, you have access to players 24/7, but reality of the breakup of the week is that we have a couple of days to recover from the game in terms of the rehab or the everything that's coming off those 90 minutes at the weekend. And then you've got 3 big sessions, and one is a regen session, which is a big physical load and getting them going again, small-sided games, and one is an attacking session, one's a defensive session, and based on the preparation for the weekend. And then the game, the day before a game, you can't obviously do that session from Craig because of the distances and the intensity, etc., etc. So you don't have an awful lot of time on the training field, different than you have at most other levels. It's just a case of managing to get those all together. So that's probably why the preparation stage is so important for us. I wanted to finish up the webinar with some input from a guest coach. So the 4 webinars, I'm going to try and get some work from it, just a different set of eyes based on the same topic that we use. So how maybe a coach from a different level or a different culture, but a similar level. So we've chosen for this one Carmelina Moscato, and Carm was one of the mentors for the Modern Soccer Coach. So I came across Carm a couple of years ago. She's done brilliant work on a coach education side with Canada. She's worked with the Canadian youth teams. She also was over in Australia, and then she was recently over in Ireland doing her UEFA A license. So big fan of Carm. Her work is fantastic, and met with her last week just online about getting this session together and try and give an overview for 6-7 minutes of the process that she goes through to deliver a session. You can see it's a lot different from ours, and but some of the ideas are absolutely fantastic. So it's trying to promote that there's not one way of doing it. There's a lot of different ways, but I find it very, very interesting when you're talking to coaches and when you're analysing different systems, is to see what the process that coach goes through. And Carm's is outstanding, as you're going to see. So here's her session. Talk me through what your thinking was when you were designing the session.
So I went into this session thinking about sort of the needs within the women's game that I've been able to observe here, specifically in Ontario, and I think that's where all objectives come from. It's essentially, it's the gaps that you identify and how can we bring the game to another level, especially for females in my case, with my lens. So I designed this session with the idea that I've noticed a lot of teams in the club level and even with our provincial level players able to enter, national team arguably, able to enter the final third, but then it sort of seems in a sense like a stalemate. So my idea was, how do we create central overloads in the attacking third or quarter, however you break down the field, and look to give the players more idea in specifically a 4-3-3 is what we work with here in the country.
Okay, brilliant. So, and like a hot topic in coaching is the start of the session, like getting the players ready, especially in a possession session where we're going to focus on passing the ball. When you design that session and you start off with rondos, what's your thinking behind going into rondos rather than unopposed technical work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and to your point, very controversial, because when people look at a rondo, they say, what realism is it when you're playing in the same space for 45 seconds, a minute? And so what I attempted to do in this case was, again, back to my initial objective, what are the gaps in the players? And arguably a lot of the lack of penetration that happens or ideas come from not being able to utilize space well. So when I broke down the game and looked to design a 2v1 or a 2-man triangle, as I defined it to the players, What I looked for is how to utilize space. So the player in possession, are they able to understand, do I need to take space, engage the defender? Can I wait for the defender to engage me? And how do I actually look to overload the defender, which was the biggest theme, and I broke it down to its most minimal aspect, 2v1. So a kind of a mindset and a skill set warm-up, more so than a structural or tactical warm-up, if that makes sense. So that was where I went with it, and I actually ran this session with U16 girls. They were passing. The only skill set I saw in this 2v1 rondo was more passing as opposed to dribbling, engaging, and overloading that poor defender. So it did actually draw out what I hoped.
I mean, how much coaching is in your work? Do you let them play? Do you stand back? What's the nature of your interaction in the warm-up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So physically, this is quite demanding, small space, lots of movement. So, 30 to 45 seconds max. Within it, I allowed them to all rotate once, free play, in which I was in an observational phase, roaming across all of the grids. I then honed in on the middle grid based on the view, so the other players could then look at the middle grid and out of the 5, because that was how it broke down. And what I did was I said, listen, I've observed, I've watched, the warm-up has happened, the physical has been managed. And then when I started to I just honed in on the decision-making of the players. And I said, okay, I've only seen passing. How about this? Something else to take into the session. How do we actually engage defenders as opposed to prematurely passing around them or not being able to successfully create overload? So right away, topic nailed. Players had a bit of fun, physically warmed up. So I checked a few boxes with that.
Moving on to your mini game, and it's about playing forward and being brave in possession. How much, you mentioned there, your skill set and mindset, and I think that's fantastic. How much is the nature of the coach whenever you're doing a session like this that you're not, stop, what about this? Stop, that's not right. How much do you impact the session?
Oh, it's everything. Like I believe stepping in the first few rounds, if I had done that, I would have lost the players arguably right away. So fun has to be part of everything we do. I think that's the misconception of, the older you get, the more serious it gets. That's actually completely incorrect. And I'll speak from personal experience. You want to have fun. You want to be competitive and maybe pick up a thing or two, not solving the world's problems and just offering a solution, dribble or pass.
What would you judge the success of the session? Is it through, like, your team scored 40 goals in the session, or is it through that it was challenging and difficult and they had to solve so many problems and they struggled?
Yes, I love what you said. So the problems, did I create the right soccer problem for them to solve? So when you look at the design, if we move on to the mini game, functionality of it, right? If I were to have put that exact 3-zone game with different numbers or shape that didn't reflect what they would have seen on the field, potentially wouldn't have had that repetition at the end game. So what I look to do is put it in the center of the field, have the team I was focused on being, in this case, the blue team, and they were operating in the area of the pitch that they were going to operate in the final game. So I did that strategically. I wanted to paint the pictures as well as I could in a fun, game that flowed, that had purpose for both teams, but specifically focused on the blue to offer them those pictures and for them to solve themselves.
Your 9v9 game, in your coaching points, you've written play central when the game gives it to you.
So when I look to write certain phrases, or if anything's in a quote for me in my session designer template, it's something that, like, if I got hit by a bus and an assistant coach had to run it or another coach had to run it, they would be able to actually look at that and say, okay, well, that's something I can say over top of the session. And what I meant by that was, with the shape, the 4-3-3, and how it's animated in the 9v9, I've kept the integrity of the front 5. And what I don't have, and you can see by the design of my field, I actually cut off the corners. I don't have fullbacks. So the hopes was that the design of this field, and this was very debatable, like, should I have cut off those end zones? And like, people are like, that doesn't look like the game. But what more so doesn't look like the game is if those center backs that I have in blue, if they were defending the flank. So I had to take away that space. Controversial for sure. But when I say play centrally when you can, the numbers are actually there to overload that poor pink back five. And if I started to see them going wide all the time, I could probably notice that it was more about, you know what, we're actually not comfortable with going central. We don't know how to solve this central problem. So the mini game would have given them ideas. If it didn't transfer into the 9v9, I, on the field, gave them 3 pre-conceived, pre-drawn up, a roadmap on how to overload the central spaces. So I could not only say, play central when it gives it to you, I was ready to show them 3 ways that we could do that with the wingers overloading, with the 8 and 10 off the front and in behind with the 9, and how the 9 could stretch the center backs a little bit more. So I was completely prepared to back up that little quote.
You mentioned there about, this was controversial in terms of cutting the. How much do you think how much license do you give yourself to think a little bit? Like there's so many sessions today are describe, robotic, replicate the game, but it doesn't actually inspire any enjoyment from coaches or players. How much creativity how do you use that process of designing sessions? Where do you design and where do you get your ideas from?
I start to look at the integrity of the game. Like, for example, does it the realism, the relevance, and the repetition? Those are some of the 3 basic things I look to make sure are in every session I design. So is it north to south, right? Like, are my goals do I have the ability, do I have a full field, and can I stick to the integrity of game of going north to south? And I said, yes. You know what? Box ticked. The game is not a rectangle in my design. So that's where the controversy came in. People said, well, it doesn't really look like the game. Yes, but based on my topic, based on the numbers I had, I designed a game in which would bring out repetition of the pictures I wanted to see. So soccer is about, clearly knowing how to expose time and space with what's afforded to you. So if I took away the corners of the pitch, that's the space that was afforded to the players. Therefore, what do they do with it? And I kept the roles. This is part of your question too. How do I design? Where do I get my creativity? Do I want those 2 blue center backs that I have defending in the flank, which what would it would have happened? And how realistic is it for them? If I'm focusing on the blue and on the defensive phase, which is not my topic, but I have them out of place, I didn't feel like that stuck to the integrity of their roles and responsibilities. So I just went with it and see how it went, and it actually went quite well. There were no issues with cutting off the corners of the pitch.
Love it. All right, last one for you. Whenever, there's not, especially today, coach education, we're not stopping the sessions as much as we probably coaches did whenever we were younger. So how do you, what's your process for almost reviewing that kind of session with your players? How does that work for you?
So when I hear that, we don't, as coaches, we don't want the session to become coach-centered, meaning player-centered. You give them the session the ability to solve problems, and it's not like, okay, here's the problem. Let me show you how to fix it, and let me actually, in fact, tell you how to fix it. So that guided discovery, but through good design. So when I look at a session like that, I'm going to aim, especially at the end game, you want it to be as free-flowing as possible. I'm going to show them 1 to 2 powerful interventions. Like my point better be super clear and give them an idea they never had before, or that they're not seeing for themselves. And in fact, I did that in the session. I showed how the 9 came off the front and how one of the 8s and 10s had to expose the space in behind that was afforded. And because they weren't seeing it, I felt the right to step in and show it. But if I'm going to go in and show it, I can't affect 2 players. I have to affect the whole thing. So that was part of my intention, was to design something that would bring about the pictures I wanted to see, help the players if the pictures weren't coming about because maybe they hadn't seen it before, a U16 group. And then at the end, ask questions. What did you learn? Go through each position, and they all have to provide some sort of feedback on what they would have learned based on the topic and the content. So it's kind of an all-encompassing debrief, but very player-led.
I love it. Perfect. Carm, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hopefully that was helpful.
Okay. Hope you enjoyed that from Carm. Told you it was a little bit different in terms of how she structured the session, but I thought it was brilliant how her thinking behind that was, and how she basically knew. I really liked that the 2 cut the corners off, knew that would be a bit controversial, but could obviously back that up because what she felt was what she wanted to attain out of the session was a lot higher than what she was willing to risk for something maybe unrealistic from those specific positions. So I thought that was brilliant and really enjoyed that there. So I will send out both her training session as a PDF separate from this, along with the replay of this webinar, and I'll also send out Craig's session as a PDF as well, so you can have the 2 session plans. I did a little bit of a poll at the end of that just to see what part of this webinar that people enjoyed the most, and just to try and see what we can do a little bit more of in the future. So thanks so much for joining there. If you haven't put a vote in, please do it before you shoot off today. So anything at all, you know where we are. If you enjoyed it, which I hope you did, feel free to give it a shout out on social media. Always trying to just promote what we're doing with this here and trying to get the word out. So really appreciate you tuning in tonight, and just made it in under an hour. So appreciate your patience with the technical difficulties at the start, and thanks so much for joining me, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. All right, bye now.